Gabriella.
Hello, Jane.
Welcome to Hyphenated. What are we talking about today?
Today we're going to be talking about knitting as therapy, or knitting that gets you through some rough times. And we've all heard that joke, knitting is cheaper than therapy. And I know you have some opinions about that or some feelings about that, and so do I. And so, yeah, what do you think about this knitting as therapy? Or
Well, first of all, I definitely don't think it's a replacement for actual therapy.
no.
But yes, as a yarn store employee, I frequently heard that joke from customers coming in. And yeah, I think there's definitely something to knitting as a way to get yourself through, give yourself something productive to do during hard times. For example, the pandemic, my knitting, I picked it up and I was like, I can't knit enough.
Totally. And there is something that's can be very therapeutic about knitting. And I know I had some rough times even prior to the pandemic. There were years that I picked up knitting because I was diagnosed with something called fibromyalgia, which ended up being misdiagnosed for 16 years. So much of my knitting in the beginning was because I was actually bedridden and didn't have any energy at all. So the only thing that I did was knit, and it was so grounding. I felt like I could be productive and I was learning something. So I think it can be therapeutic. But what are some thoughts for you?
Well, the other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with this that I often hear is like, oh, knitting, that must be so relaxing when people hear I knit or whatever.
Not
Not always. Depending on the type of project, the type of pattern you're doing, I do tend to go for simple knits that I don't have to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't know that I would describe it as relaxing. For me, it's more just like I want to make those things. I want that creative output.
Right.
It's not like I don't think for me it's something about like the soothing repetitive motion of my hands.
Mm-hmm. So it was really interesting because I just went on a silent retreat, a meditation retreat, and one of the questions that I had for them, because it was from home because of the pandemic, was on our off times they say about doing mindful things like walking meditation, or when you're washing the dishes, do it mindfully and really be present. And I said, can I knit? And they said, yes, absolutely. What I noticed was that because I was following a pattern, there were times that came up when, counting isn't necessarily, like if I made a mistake, the emotion of frustration would come up. And so I could be mindful about that. But I wouldn't say that it's necessarily soothing and calming unless all you're doing is the knit stitch no matter what.
But even then, so another instance where this might apply would be knitting on planes. Like I'm a fairly nervous flyer, like especially if we hit any turbulence.
Right.
My heart starts pounding and I have to stop knitting at that time. Like I always have knitting on the plane, and I usually am knitting if I'm not sleeping on a long haul flight.
Right.
But it's not like we're hitting turbulence and I just keep calmly knitting like it's soothing me through this scary experience. It's not like I just stop, and then I have to, once we start leveling out again, try to figure out where I am in the pattern. So for that reason, I generally bring simple patterns on planes, even though I think like, oh, this will be like, I have 16 hours to really delve into this complicated pattern where I won't be interrupted, but it doesn't work out like that for me.
No, it doesn't for me either. But I will say that maybe the idea, or not the idea, but the process of knitting is that it actually can give you something to focus on rather than the things that are worrying you. So what happens is instead of getting into the story of how bad something is, or getting worked up about something, or being upset about something that you have absolutely no control over and it's really frustrating or whatever, that knitting can give you something to focus on where you're not thinking about the problem or the issue or the thing that's, I get hours of relief from, for instance, if I read the paper or look at the news, already my anxiety is up like this. But if I start knitting, I'm no longer thinking about the paper or the news. I am now knitting, and my anxiety goes down because I'm focused on something else. And also, there is something about the creative part of it, and the being productive. For me, it feels productive.
Yeah, for me, it's like I have this almost compulsion to knit if I'm like watching a movie or something. Yeah. It's like I can't just be sitting here doing nothing. I have to like be working on that sweater or whatever. I don't know what that says about me or what.
Well, no,
what
but I do
means.
it too. I mean, like at night when we sit down, my husband and I will sit down and we'll watch TV, and we have certain programs that we watch that we really enjoy, and I am pretty much always knitting. I mean, there are certain ones where I'm like, no, I can't knit to this one because I'm watching subtitles, or maybe I need to knit something more, a little bit easier. But, yeah.
So, do you find getting really absorbed in a more complex pattern is the thing when you are feeling like you want to soothe yourself or get absorbed into a project to take your mind off something stressful, or do you tend toward a more simple?
I tend towards maybe something in the middle, because I will find that if it's something that's complex, it actually might bring up more frustration because I'm learning something new, or I have to rip back a little bit, which isn't always frustrating, but if it's a lace pattern and I have to do something different around the neckline or whatever, like decrease around the neckline during a lace pattern, which for me is like, I just don't want to do it, then that I'm not going to get absorbed because I'm already distracted by the thing, right? I'm already distracted by whatever is bothering me. So I think I need something that's a little bit a hair easier, but is still absorbing. So maybe a medium kind of type of project that's like it'll push me a hair, but not so much that I'm have to be totally absorbed, because I think that I may not have the patience for it, just because I might be a little bit more anxious, or I might be a little bit more worried or whatever. What about you?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think in that kind of situation, I don't want to have to try to figure anything out. So I don't want to have to, figure out how to, some of the patterns will say there's a lot that you still have to figure out. So I'd rather not do something, like some kind of complicated shaping or whatever, just trying to maintain a lace pattern through the neckline decreases or whatever. But something maybe like a cable where I have to follow the chart because I can't it's a little too intricate to memorize.
Right.
That's probably about the level or even, I guess like a lace pattern where I'm kind of like having to look at the chart, but not one that's like so complex that I have to look at it every single stitch.
I think that's the thing. I agree with you. I think that's about where I would do it. Like just enough to where I'm looking and checking, and because after a while sometimes you get used to that pattern, but it does keep you engaged to a certain extent, but not, like you said, not having to figure something out, because I think that my bandwidth maybe won't be as big for that at that time. I'll have limited bandwidth already just for daily life, let alone trying to figure something complicated, So, yeah, but I do think that it has gotten me through some tough times.
I think another aspect of it also that is therapeutic is that it's often community building and a bonding experience that you share with other people, whether you're going to a yarn store and having like a knitting circle at the yarn store, or even just on your own with some friends, or even the online communities that are built up around knitting now. I think those are totally ways that we as knitters, get some of that therapeutic benefit from knitting is that community aspect of
There's
it.
definitely something about like connecting with others and having something in common and being able to interact with somebody else, with another human being, about a subject that you really are enjoying. That is therapeutic. Absolutely.
Totally. And
Yeah.
some of the, just like the fandom communities that happen around any sort of like hobby, it's cool, it's special, I think. So I often see this at events like yarn crawls, or like the, what are they called,
Was it
the
Stitches?
like festivals,
Yeah,
the,
we went to Stitches a few years ago.
what is the category, what is the genre of that?
I can't remember.
Yeah, like Stitches or Vogue Knitting Live, or
Right.
I feel like they're called festivals, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That sounds wrong.
Maybe you guys
Those
can tell
things.
us.
Yeah, whatever those things are
You
called.
can write it in the comments section, because we can't remember. I am having brain fade, and it sounds like you are too.
Yeah, but I think I've always attended those as a worker in a booth, so I kind of get to see all the knitting fans, and it looks like so much fun.
It
Like
does look like
I would like to go to one as a consumer,
Right.
and just like,
Well, that's going to be something else that we get to talk about too, is like on another one of our episodes, is being on both sides of going to one of these festivals or yarn crawl as well. I think we were going to talk about that as well.
totally, yeah. But I think, and sometimes I'll even see, usually like with a yarn crawl or some of those festivals, we'll often see people who load up all their friends in a car and they carpool and do it all
They
together.
wear the same T-shirts. Everybody has not everybody, but some people wear the same T-shirts, or they'll.
So
there was somebody who,
click.
yeah, exactly. It's really cute. Or they'll even rent a driver.
Wow.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
LA traffic, that probably sounds like the way to go. Yeah, totally. But then I also will always see like the people who have, maybe they haven't found their group of people who knit as well, and they have their significant other come with them, and that's
Right.
always so sweet, I think.
That's really cute.
Just to see that kind of support, even though you can tell the significant other is oftentimes not into it.
Right, exactly. They're like
but
looking
they're
at their
like-
phone or sitting somewhere else, or just like, go ahead.
Or they're just kind of following around, but not
Right.
really looking at the yarn or
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just love to see that
It's pretty
level
cute.
of support in the relationship or whatever.
But I think that's the other thing too, is that with knitting as therapy, like, do you have support around your knitting? And like, my husband was always really supportive of my going to the yarn store, or because I think he knew that I was suffering so much when I was sick, when I was like ill. And so he was super supportive, because he saw that it gave me some relief. I wasn't thinking about, the body parts that hurt, or the brain fog, or the fatigue, because I was like so into the knitting, right? So that's the other thing too, is like hopefully having someone who supports you in your knitting, because they can see what benefits you're getting from it.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah, and I think during the pandemic, knitting has really kind of soared. People have gotten back into knitting, or started it up, or whatever. It's been pretty great.
Yes.
I mean, it's better than that, and then the increases in alcohol consumption and alcoholism, and better than the increases in diabetes and compulsive eating. And I mean, like those, so it's like, yeah, those give you relief too, but they cause a lot of harm, whereas knitting may not cause so much harm, maybe a little dent to your pocketbook in some time, but not like the other ones. It's the same. It's this kind of like, checking out, right? But you're checking out with knitting, and then you have like a sweater or a hat or a scarf. So
and creative output.
Right. Right.
Yeah, my mom would say, "You're so addicted. You're totally addicted to knitting." But I guess if you're going to have an addiction, that's an okay one to have.
Right. So. And the other thing too is like, when you talk about addictions are things that cause harm to yourself and others. Like, how much harm am I causing to myself?
I mean, I did have an ex-boyfriend stab himself with a knitting needle.
Right.
So not intentionally. It was an unintentional stabbing. That was
the thing, and you didn't stab him.
It was my needle that went into his thigh, though.
One of our other programs we're going to talk about is knitting disasters.
Horror stories.
Horror stories with yarn, needles, or knitting. So that is going to have to go into that category.
Yes, all right. I'll save
we
the
have
story
some.
For a later.
Save that story. So if you guys, any viewers who are watching, have any comments to say about has knitting helped you therapeutically, or do you have any opinions about it? Are there any examples? We'd love to hear from you. It would be super cool.
Ironically, though, you didn't actually knit that much during the
pandemic.
Early days of the pandemic, right?
No, because I was very grumpy.
So you turned more to like painting and learning Spanish.
And meditation and classes like that. But I was grumpy because I had just left my job that had to do with knitting, so I think I was a little resentful.
Well, yeah, I was in the same boat in terms of leaving the job. However,
we both left the job.
I picked it up full force during the pandemic. I was like, hell yeah, I am sitting in my house and knitting. And it was really, Jessie May released a free pattern right in the early days of the pandemic that was like an instant gratification tank top thing.
Have you shown that one to me?
I'm not sure.
Oh, you're going to have to show it to me.
But it was a one skein tank top, which is like knitting a hat or something. And I was
That's
like, oh
cool.
my God, I have all these like single skeins. I can just grab anything from my stash and I'll knit it up in like a day or two. And for some reason, there was something about that instant gratification, although it's not something I wear frequently, I'll be honest, but just being able to like make that thing with a yarn that I had and just have a completed project so quickly, it was like a no-brainer. And then she just kept releasing patterns throughout those early days of the pandemic, and I was all about them.
So it was helpful to you and therapeutic to you.
Oh yeah, for sure, because it was like, yeah, I mean, especially we had 1 week where we were in serious lockdown where they said like, do not even leave your apartment, like don't go outside at all if you don't have to. And I literally just sat in my apartment 24 hours a day.
I think that was the week I just binged Netflix, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, knitting, and I luckily had a bicycle trainer that I could set up so I could ride my bike in my apartment.
Oh, that's good.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was really therapeutic for you. Well, it's been therapeutic for me since I just picked it back up again. Seeing as there's, wave after wave of continuing pandemic. So now that I'm back into it, since we got back in touch, it's actually been really helpful and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm not resentful anymore.
I'm glad. So you worked through it with
I did.
every stitch.
I worked through it, yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on therapeutic knitting? Do you find it therapeutic? Is it relaxing or is it stressful?
Yes.
Or is it both, depending on the time of day and project you're tackling? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you're enjoying this channel.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.